My name? Charles Goodnight. Now, I hear tell there are folks that are starting to call me the father of the Texas Panhandle. Don't let them fool you. When I'm not around, they just call me Old Man Goodnight. Bob here thought you guys might want to know something about my life. I did live a life, that is fact. I've been around for many years, done a lot of things. Plan on doing a lot more, so don't expect to read the end of this story anytime soon. I was born up in Illinois, born in 1836. Now you might remember that's about the same time that the Republic of Texas is getting born down here. Me and Texas, we were kind of connected right from the start. My dad died when I was very young. My stepdad, he decided we needed to start a whole new life out here in Texas. We came out to Milam County down on the Brazos about that time. Sadly, he didn't live very long. How old are you?
11.
You are 11. I was your very same age. I had every bit of 6 months of formal schooling at that time when my stepdad died, and I basically went to work doing pretty much anything anybody would pay me to do. When I was about 15, I was actually a jockey for a while down at Port Sullivan there on the Brazos. Yeah, I was skinnier then, for a fact. Mostly, though, I am known as a cattleman. Tell you a little bit about how that got started. Like I said, my stepfather, he passed away. About 1853, my mother, she remarried, and I got me a brand new stepbrother. Name of Wes. John Wesley Sheeks was his name. I called him Wes. A lot of folks were going out to California about that time. Well, Wes and I, we went shares on a small cattle herd there on the Brazos, but we were looking for some new scenery too. So we lit out and trailed those cattle up to the Black Spring area up in Palapinto County, just west of us here. Now I keep saying we. Tell you the truth, Wes was doing most of the cattle work at that time. I was busy running freight back and forth to Houston. Until Wes, he up and got married. Yeah, they moved on and left me stuck with this big herd of longhorn cattle to try to figure out what I was going to do with it. Well, good news is I had a neighbor there in Palapinto County named Oliver Loving. Oliver had a pretty sizable herd. He'd been trailing for quite a while already. He was older than me. He kind of became, you might say he was my mentor. I would say for sure he was the very best friend of my adult life. Very dear friends. But before we could get started good, well, Texas got itself caught up in that big mess that the North and South had started back east. And a lot of our guys went out to fight. A bunch of us, though, we stayed home in what was called the Frontier Regiment. Now our job, we were basically the home guard. Our job was to patrol the Llano Estacado. That's the State Plains area. It's between the New Mexico territory and Texas. I was a guide and a scout during that time. I learned a lot about that area. It came in handy a little bit later on. 1864 came along. War was over. We got back here to Texas, and we were trying to make some sense out of life. Turns out the only thing Texas had left that anybody anywhere else was interested in paying money for was cattle. And luckily, cattle was the one thing we had plenty of. While we'd been all fighting, they grew like Jimson weed. A lot of folks, they were running cattle up what's called the Chisholm Trail from here in Fort Worth up to the railheads up in Kansas. Well, I got to thinking, though, about all those forts I saw out in the middle of nowhere there in New Mexico territory. I got the idea that we might make better money if we ran our herds that way. Oliver, he wasn't sold on the idea, but he came along. And about 1866, let's see, there was me and Oliver, one of Oliver's top hands is a guy named Bose Eichert. Came along, Clay Allison, One Arm Bill Wilson, about 18 cow hands and about 2,000 head of cattle. We lit out from Fort Belknap here in Texas Now, to avoid as much trouble as we could, we came south along the Stagecoach Road, all the way down to the Pecos River. But from there, we were kind of on our own. We cut our own brand new trail up the Pecos there to Fort Sumner. We made 2 trips, no problem, everything went smooth. 1867 though, other people were catching on to our idea. We had competition. Oliver, he decided he wanted to go run ahead and get to the fort early and lock in a good price for us. Now that was a rough road for a couple of people to try to travel. I tried to talk him out of it. He did it anyway. And along the way, he got impatient. He started traveling in the daylight to try to make better time. I begged him not to do that. He was mortally wounded in a struggle with the Comanche on the way. He did not die right away, though. He did make it up to Fort Sumner. Miraculously, his buddy, One Arm Bill, made it, and we found, made it about half dead. When we found him on the trail, he let us know what happened, and I did make it up to Fort Sumner just in time to hear my very best friend's last request. And remember I said Oliver, he wasn't really crazy about this idea to start with. So he made one last request. He made me promise that his body would be brought back here, would not be left in that strange dried out land. He wanted to come back to Texas to be buried, the land he loved. I made that promise. I kept that promise. His grave is right over here in Weatherford. After that, we trailed cattle a little while. Everybody kind of went their own way, and I wound up over in Colorado, around Pueblo. And I hooked up there. I'm always running into really great people. Life is full. That is one of the best things in life, is the people that you manage to partner with. I found another former Texan fellow named John Chisholm. He was beginning to make a big name for himself there in the New Mexico territory. And we picked up where Oliver and I left off, and we finished running that trail all the way up across Colorado, all the way to Cheyenne, Wyoming. We were doing really good. I made a lot of money. I did a lot of good things in Colorado. Very best thing I ever did that time, though, is I married Mary Ann Dyer. And I called her Molly. We had been sweethearts ever since we were young there in Central Texas. I had gone my way, she had gone hers out to Kentucky, but I went and found her, and she did become my wife. And with some trepidation, I'll admit, she decided to come west with me back to Colorado. We did pretty good. I was making money every which way. The cattle business kind of got left aside. I was into banking. I even owned an opera hall for a while. We were doing great till 1873. If you remember, that's when the bottom fell out of everything, seemed like all over the world. Well, I figured that meant it was a good time for me to get back to doing what I did best, running cattle. And I wanted to get back to the land I loved the best, and that was Texas. So I looked over to the east, and I found a place called Paladura Canyon. Beautiful green grass, a lot of water in the bottom of the canyon, had those gorgeous stone walls to protect us in the winter. Ideal place to start a new ranch. So I borrowed what little money I could off of what I had left in Colorado, and I rounded up about 1,600 head. And me and those 1,600 head and that borrowed money set out to make the very first cattle ranch in the panhandle of Texas. Started off slow. To tell you the truth, I was living in a hut for a while till I built a small ranch house there on the floor of the canyon. A fellow named John Adair had been a real big help. He had provided most of the front money for all of this. He was an Irishman up in Denver. And I talked with him, and he was so good at helping me out, we became partners. Matter of fact, I turned the whole business end of the ranch over to John, and I actually took myself a pretty good salary, and I managed the ranch. I managed the cattle end. And we did great. We started bringing in Herefords from back east, a lot better beef than we were raising with those Longhorns. We were doing fine. Now, my Comanche neighbors, not so fine. About this time, the Army was doing their best to kill off the buffalo. And of course, the Comanche and the other folks, they counted on those buffaloes for food, so they were getting kind of desperate. They were raiding our area to try to find some way to survive. Well, I met with a fellow named Quanah Parker. You may have heard of him. He was the Comanche war chief. And we decided this fighting each other, this isn't really helping anybody. So we made a treaty. We made a deal. You guys need beef to survive. You come to me, we're going to give you the beef you need. Your part of the deal is, if you feel like there's any fighting that needs to be done, you go do it somewhere else. And that worked out pretty good. Everybody came out ahead on that. Molly, she wanted more. She said, you know, what we really ought to do is try to save those buffalo, bison. And we did. We started with one little calf that she rescued, and pretty soon we had a size of a little herd there. I tried for a while, actually, believe it or not, I tried to crossbreed those bison, those buffalo, and the cattle. I came up with something I call catalogue. Yeah, it didn't catch on. No. But everything else did. With John Adair's help, we were expanding. That little two-room ranch house, if you look over in the area now, a few miles away from the canyon, you're going to see a beautiful ranch house. It's the headquarters of what we're now calling the J.A. Ranch, in honor of John Adair that made it all possible. Molly and I lived there, got involved in a lot of things. It's okay that that ranch house was a couple of miles away, because by that time we are spread out over close to 1 million acres of the Texas Panhandle. Those 1,600 head we started out with are now close to 100,000. Truth be told, you know, that's getting a little bit big for me. I'm just about ready, to tell you the truth, to turn the whole shebang over to John and his family. I think I'm going to do that. And I'm going to find me a little spot, start a new place, and just kind of relax. You know, I might even use some of that money I've made to start a school down here, so that other fellows coming in will have a better start than maybe I did. Who knows? Time will tell. Speaking of time, I think Bob's about ready for me to hush. Thank you guys for listening. Enjoy your visit here in Texas.